The phrase, "is a deadly sharpshooter," is the payoff, the big reveal. Up to this point, the outlaws think they're the ones holding the guns, the fear, the power. The townsfolk seem like sheep, the saloon seems soft, the widow seems weak. But these 5 words spin the whole story on its head. That quiet figure the gang overlooked, the lone widow they assumed was helpless, isn't just armed. She's a deadly sharpshooter. This changes her from a passive victim into an unstoppable force. The power dynamic flips in an instant, too. What does deadly sharpshooter really mean? A sharpshooter is more than just a person who owns a gun. In the language of the Wild West, a sharpshooter is an elite marksman, someone who doesn't miss. Think of Annie Oakley or the legendary frontier snipers who could hit a coin tossed in the air, or take out a bandit from hundreds of yards away. Deadly means her skill isn't just for show. She doesn't just shoot cans off a fence for sport. Her shots are precise and lethal. She's not firing warning shots to scare the outlaws off. She's going to put them in the dirt before they draw their next breath. 3. The widows. Hidden past this line implies so much more about her backstory. How does a widow become a deadly sharpshooter? It hints at a life lived hard. Maybe she learned from a husband who was a gunslinger, a hunter, or a soldier. Maybe she grew up in a frontier family where shooting was survival. Or maybe she trained herself, after tragedy struck, as a way to protect herself from a cruel world that had already taken everything from her. Every time she pulls that trigger, it's not just skill, it's experience, loss, and an iron will forged by hardship. The outlaws carry guns because they like to intimidate. The widow carries hers because it's her line between life and death, and she's mastered it. 4. Why this is so satisfying in storytelling. Stories are full of characters who get underestimated, and audiences love to see them prove everyone wrong. But being a deadly sharpshooter isn't just about proving strength. It's about hidden power. Think of what the word deadly does here. It doesn't just mean dangerous. It means final, decisive, unstoppable. She doesn't miss. She doesn't hesitate. The fear she might once have felt is gone, replaced by a lethal calm. This is the moment when the underdog, the so-called victim, becomes the predator. It's a primal reversal. The wolf is inside the flock, disguised as a sheep. 5. The saloon becomes a trap with this final twist. The saloon is no longer just a peaceful backdrop or a crime scene. It's the widow's hunting ground. She knows every corner, every shadow. The outlaws think they're cornering her, but they're the ones boxed in. The layout of the place becomes part of her strategy. The swinging doors they burst through so easily are now the only way out. The tables become cover. The mirror behind the bar might show her where they hide. The clink of glass or the squeak of a boot tells her exactly where to aim next. 6. Fear shifts sides up. Until this point, the townsfolk were likely terrified, cowering under tables. The outlaws were the only ones with power. But once the widow fires her first shot, and it hits its mark, fear shifts like a sudden wind. The outlaws realize they're not the only killers in the room. Imagine their faces. They hear one shot, one outlaw drops. Then silence, except for the echo of that shot. Maybe a pool of blood spreads across the floorboards. Now the big, loud men with all their threats are wide-eyed, clutching pistols they suddenly know won't save them. The psychological impact is enormous. The saloon's atmosphere flips from chaos and fear to dread and doom for the raiders. 7. The widows. Motivation, not just survival. This twist invites you to wonder, why does she fight? Is it just self-defense, or is it revenge? Maybe these outlaws were connected to her husband's death. Maybe this is the 4th time they've robbed this town. Or maybe she's tired of waiting for a sheriff who never comes and has decided to bring her own brand of justice. A deadly sharpshooter isn't just someone with a skill. She's someone with a cause. Each shot is not just an act of violence, but an act of reclamation, reclaiming her safety, her dignity, her place in a world that tried to erase her. 8. Symbolism. The widow as frontier justice in classic Western stories. The law is often far away or too corrupt to help. So, the lone figure who takes justice into their own hands becomes a symbol of frontier law. Rough, but righteous. The widow embodies this. She's not just protecting herself, she's punishing those who thought they could terrorize honest people without consequences. In doing so, she becomes a folk legend, a figure people whisper about. Don't mess with that town, you know who lives there. Her deadliness becomes a warning. Never mistake silence for weakness or grief for surrender. 9. The aftermath. The story that spreads because of this twist is a deadly sharpshooter. The story doesn't end when the last shot is fired. Afterward, this widow's legend would grow. The survivors, maybe the bartender, the piano player, will tell the tale. Instead of being remembered as the quiet, broken widow, she'd be immortalized as the woman who never missed. Her reputation might keep other gangs away. Or it might draw even worse ones, people wanting to test her skill. Either way, she's no longer invisible. Her secret is out. 10. The emotional core. Grief transformed finally. This phrase shows us how grief can be transformed into something powerful. The world expected the widow to fade, to be fragile, but she took that darkness and shaped it into a weapon, literal and metaphorical. Her rifle is an extension of her will. In this way, is a deadly sharpshooter is not just about killing. It's about agency, the ability to stand up and say, "You will not take anything more from me." The saloon, the townsfolk, her life, they're hers to protect now. Final thoughts. The true punch of these words in just 5 words is a deadly sharpshooter redefines the entire story. The peaceful saloon becomes a battlefield. The outlaws become the prey. The widow becomes a legend. 1. The power of unaware. The blindness of overconfidence. The word unaware is deceptively simple, but in storytelling it's a powerful turning point. The outlaws think they've sized up the entire situation. They believe they hold all the cards, but they're missing something vital. They don't have the full picture. Being unaware means you're vulnerable. You're arrogant enough to think you know what you're up against, but you don't. In Westerns, this blindness often leads to a downfall. It's the classic sin of outlaws and bullies, underestimating the people you want to dominate. They walk in, pistols twirling, boots stomping, not even bothering to scan the room carefully because they think fear alone will keep everyone quiet. This detail transforms the scene from a straightforward stick-up to a ticking time bomb. The tension doesn't come from the outlaws' threat, it comes from what they don't know. The audience now knows something the characters don't, which creates dramatic irony. We're watching the outlaws swagger and shout, but in the back of our minds we're thinking, "You fools, you have no idea what's about to hit you too. Who is the lone widow?" A subversion of stereotypes, then comes the pivot, the lone widow inside. This phrase shifts the focus from the villains to the hidden hero. In most classic stories, especially Westerns, a widow is coded as a tragic figure, someone who's lost her husband, someone who lives in the shadows of that grief. She's often imagined as delicate, perhaps financially vulnerable, maybe waiting for a sheriff or bounty hunter to protect her, but the title immediately suggests she's not what you'd expect. She's lone, an interesting choice instead of just widow. Lone carries echoes of the Lone Ranger or the Lone Wolf, an independent figure, apart from the crowd, unafraid to be by herself. She doesn't need a posse. She doesn't have friends waiting to ride in and save her. Her strength is self-contained. The outlaws, and likely the other townsfolk too, underestimate her because of the label widow. In a harsh, lawless place, being a widow might be seen as a weakness. No husband to protect her, no family to shield her. But that label hides the truth. She's not broken by her loss, she's sharpened by it. 3. What is she doing there? The title invites you to imagine, why is this lone widow in the saloon? Maybe she owns it, inherited it after her husband died. Maybe she works there, blending into the scenery, washing glasses behind the bar or sitting at a corner table. Maybe she's just a quiet presence who never causes trouble, which makes her invisible to the outlaws. Or perhaps she's there precisely because she's waiting for something like this to happen. Maybe she knows the town is a target. Maybe she knows these outlaws by reputation, or maybe they killed her husband. The idea that she's inside the saloon isn't just literal, it's a sign that she's right in the heart of the danger, where no one would expect the real threat to be. 4. The emotional undercurrent. What loss creates a widow carries grief. But this phrase implies she's found a purpose within that grief, not just mourning, but transforming her. Pain into resolve. Loss is what makes her dangerous. She's seen death up close. She knows what it feels like to have everything taken from her. The outlaws who swagger in with pistols and threats have no clue that they're stepping right into the crosshairs of someone who's already endured the worst. This is a classic theme in westerns and revenge stories. People who have nothing left to lose are the most dangerous. The widow has no fear of death because she's already stared it in the face. Her husband's absence is the silent fire behind her patience. The outlaws believe the biggest threat in the room is themselves. They don't realize the real storm is the quiet figure sitting alone, steady hands on a hidden rifle, waiting for the right moment. 5. The hidden weapon, being overlooked in. Storytelling, a character being underestimated, is a weapon in itself. The lone widow is a ghost in plain sight. The outlaws don't see her because she doesn't look like a fighter. Maybe she's small, maybe she wears mourning black, maybe she's older than they expect. Whatever it is, her appearance camouflages her true nature. Her real weapon isn't just her gun. It's the fact that no one sees the gun until it's too late. This is the same idea behind classic tropes like the old man who's actually a retired gunslinger or the farm boy who turns out to be the fastest draw in the West. The unawareness is the gap that gives her the upper hand. 6. The psychological trap. So, this part of the title shows us that the outlaws have already lost before they've begun. The moment they walked through that door unaware, they sealed their fate. The widow has the element of surprise. She's had time to choose her position, to plan her shots, to watch them move like pieces on a chessboard. She's not reacting in panic. She's calm, methodical. Maybe she even lets them get comfortable, so they let their guard down even more. It's a psychological ambush. The outlaws believe they're the predators, but they're prey, penned in by their own arrogance. 7. The audience's role, dramatic irony and satisfaction when we read this part of the title. We as the audience are in on the secret. We're the only ones who know the outlaws are doomed. This builds delicious tension. We imagine the outlaws laughing, threatening the bartender, smashing bottles, all while the true danger watches silently from the shadows. That gap between what the outlaws know and what we know is what makes the story thrilling. The bigger that gap, the bigger the payoff when the widow finally reveals her true nature. The phrase, unaware the lone widow inside, is the promise of that payoff. It guarantees a moment when the outlaw's overconfidence will shatter. 8. The larger symbol. Don't judge by appearances. At its heart, this part of the title is a lesson in judgment or misjudgment. The outlaws assume the saloon is harmless because it looks harmless. They assume the widow is weak because she looks weak, but they're blinded by their own preconceptions. In a sense, the widow represents anyone who's been overlooked or underestimated. Her transformation from invisible to unstoppable is what makes her powerful. She's proof that danger doesn't always wear a menacing face. Sometimes it looks like a grieving woman sipping whiskey alone in a corner booth. Final thoughts on part 2 when you zoom in on this single part, Unaware the Lone Widow. Inside, you find an entire world of tension, character backstory, and emotional stakes. This short phrase holds: the ignorance that seals the outlaws, fate, the hidden strength of the widow, the trap that's about to spring, the lesson about judging people by appearances, and the delicious dramatic irony that makes the audience lean in, waiting for that first gunshot to ring out. 1. The opening scene. A clash of worlds right away. This phrase sets up two worlds that are about to collide. The outlaws, chaos, violence, lawlessness. The peaceful saloon, order, normalcy, fragile calm. The word raid makes it clear this isn't a polite visit. It's a violation, an intrusion that turns everyday life into sudden danger. The tension springs from this contrast. The quiet hum of a peaceful evening shattered by boots, spurs, and drawn guns. 2. The symbolism of outlaws in classic Western storytelling. Outlaws are more than criminals. They represent the raw, untamed wilderness of human nature. They reject the law, take what they want by force, and believe they answer to no one. In many tales, they ride into town like a storm, a roving pack of wolves threatening the fragile safety that settlers, townsfolk, and pioneers worked so hard to build. They're the reminder that civilization is still new and fragile, one saloon door away from chaos. These outlaws might be a small-time gang, or maybe they're part of a larger notorious band. Their reputations likely precede them. Maybe the bartender recognizes their leader. Maybe a patron freezes mid-sip when he sees their tattoos or dusty bandanas. Even before they say a word, their presence radiates menace. 3. The meaning of raid. The word raid is powerful. It implies suddenness, a strike out of nowhere without warning or mercy. A raid is not a fair fight. It's an ambush. The outlaws want to catch their victims off guard, helpless. A raid is not just about stealing money. It's about control, intimidation, and fear. The gang probably wants to show the whole town what happens when you cross them, or when you fail to pay protection money, or when you're too weak to stop them. A raid leaves scars, bullet holes in the walls, broken glass, bruises on people's minds, long after the outlaws ride away. Their violence echoes through the town's collective memory. 4. The saloon as the heart of town. Why raid a saloon? Because in the Old West, a saloon isn't just a bar. It's the beating heart of frontier life, where miners spend their wages, cowboys come to rest, travelers trade news, and lonely settlers find brief community. The saloon is also a symbol of fragile civilization. 4 walls and swinging doors trying to keep the wildness outside. It's a place where people want to feel safe, to let down their guard. By choosing the saloon as their target, the outlaws are attacking the community's sense of normalcy. They're sending a message: you're never really safe. We can come for you anywhere. That's what makes it feel so shocking and wrong. 5. The peaceful contrast. The title doesn't just say saloon. It calls it a peaceful saloon. That one word tells you what's at stake. It's not a rowdy dive full of brawlers and gamblers itching for a fight. It's a small, friendly place. Maybe a family-run establishment, a warm fire in the hearth, an old piano playing a soft tune. It might be the only spot in a harsh frontier town where people can relax and forget the dangers outside. That peace is precious, and the raid threatens to destroy it in seconds. The more peaceful the saloon, The greater the tragedy when that peace is shattered. 6. The people inside, innocence at risk. When you imagine a peaceful saloon, you picture ordinary people, ranch hands, ranchers, maybe a traveling preacher taking a meal, a shy barmaid, the old piano player. They're not fighters. They're not ready for violence. They trust the barkeep, the walls, and the unspoken rule that inside this place, there's a bubble of civility. The moment the outlaws slam the doors open, you can almost hear glasses clinking to a stop, chairs scraping back, hushed whispers turning to gasps. These people represent the innocence and normal life that the widow, the hidden sharpshooter, is about to protect. 7. The atmosphere before the raid. This first phrase makes you imagine what the saloon was like moments before. Laughter drifting through smoke and warm lantern light. Someone playing cards near the window. The bartender polishing glasses behind the counter. Maybe there's a young couple sharing a rare date night. Everything feels safe, normal, until a gust of wind slams the doors open. Boots pound the floorboards and the outlaws bark their demands. That sudden turn from peace to terror is what hooks the audience. 8. A classic Western. Tension, chaos versus order. Outlaws raid a peaceful saloon is a microcosm of every great Western story. The frontier is a place where order and chaos constantly clash. The saloon is order, walls, warmth, music, community. The outlaws are chaos, the untamed wilderness that civilization hasn't beaten yet. This moment is the frontier distilled. Will the town's fragile peace survive, or will lawlessness win? In this case, we know from the rest of the title that the widow's hidden skill is the town's secret weapon against that chaos. 9. Themes of vulnerability and defiance. This simple setup shows how vulnerable people feel when true violence comes to their door. But it also sets up the theme of defiance. One person, one hidden force, can push back against an entire gang. The people cowering under tables will later remember the widow's stand, and her hidden skill gives them hope that good can beat evil, even in a lawless place. 10. Imagery that pulls you in just 5 words. Outlaws raid a peaceful saloon. You see so much. Dusty boots and spurs on a wooden floor. Swinging doors banging against the wall. A bartender, frozen with a bottle mid-pour. A woman clutching her child. The hush of fear, the standoff, the threat of gunfire. This visual power makes the phrase more than just an opening line. It's an entire scene painted in your mind. 11. What it promises finally. This phrase makes a promise. You're about to see an underdog story. A violation will be answered with unexpected justice. The peaceful will rise up, embodied by the widow, to show that the Wild West isn't just about who has the biggest gun, but who has the sharpest aim and the strongest resolve. Final thoughts. Why this opening works. The best stories grab you in the first line, and Outlaws raid a peaceful saloon does exactly that. It tells you where you are, a familiar, fragile, safe place. Who the villains are, outlaws, arrogant and merciless. What the stakes are, innocence threatened. Peace about to be torn apart. It hooks you emotionally. You want to see if the townsfolk survive, if the outlaws win, or if something hidden inside that quiet saloon will turn the tables. And we know from the rest of the title that the answer is yes. The twist is coming.